Hi everyone, my name is Steph. Welcome to the Novelty Corner and welcome to the second of my Psy-Changeling anthology recaps. So technically this is the first anthology collection, I've just reviewed them out of order. This is Wild Invitation. It contains 4 novellas that fit into the Psy-Changeling world. As I go through talking about the different novellas, I will let you know where they fit in the series. If you are unfamiliar, I have been recapping the entire Psy-Changeling series. This video marks the last one before Last Guard, which comes out at the end of the month. I am going to talk about each novella. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overview of the story and then some things that I really liked about it. These are not going to be as in-depth as the recaps of the main novels of the series because they are novellas and they're quite short, and I think they offer more insight into particular side characters from the series rather than overall plot development. The first thing I want to say about this series is that there is a very loose Christmas theme in this story. So it's noted at the start of the book that the Psy tried to wipe out Christmas because it didn't fit in with Silence. And they tried for a while, they renamed the day, then the humans and the changelings are like, no, we like Christmas, so we're just going to call it Christmas. Each of these stories do feature a very loose Christmas theme in them, but it's not a big in-your-face type of Christmas story. But if you're looking for Christmas novellas, then you could probably read some of these. So the first novella in the collection is Beat of Temptation, which is book 0.5 in the series, so it actually takes place prior to Slave to Sensation. And this is the story of how Tamsin and Nathan became mates. So Nathan is one of Lucas's sentinels. We meet them in Slave to Sensation when they're happily mated, they've got twin boys, and everything is perfect for them. However, what we find out is that it didn't start that way. This is an age gap romance. There is a 10-year age difference between Tammy and Nate, and we find out at the beginning of this novella that they actually realized that they were mates when Tammy was 15 years old, and so Nate was 25. Obviously, nothing happened at that point. The novella actually takes place when Tammy is 19. She's returned to the pack. She's a healer, but she's also medically trained. So she's just done her residency and has returned to the pack to take on the healer duties. She took over at 17 when the previous pack healer, Shayla, who was Lucas's mother, died. And now that she's come back, she's 19, she's determined to pursue something with Nate. However, he keeps her at arm's distance for the majority of the book. He is very concerned that she's quite young and that she hasn't had time to live her life. And he doesn't want her to eventually come to resent him for that, because his modeling for that is his parents, who mated very young, and then his mother resented his father by the end of it. That said, he hasn't had a relationship or exchanged skin privileges with anyone since he realized that Tammy was his mate when she was 15. Now that she's back, they sort of can't avoid each other, and even though he's not willing to take their relationship to the next level, he's also not willing to leave her alone, and this becomes a real point of contention between the two of them, to the point that Tammy eventually decides that she's going to leave, because what she thinks is that Nate is looking after her and he's doing it out of obligation rather than the fact that he actually wants to be her mate. After giving him many opportunities to acknowledge their relationship and he doesn't, she leaves. And it freaks him out big time because he doesn't know where she's gone and no one will tell him because they're all pissed at him because he hasn't treated her well. And they're all like, why didn't you accept her? Why didn't you tell her that you wanted her? And the only way that he's able to track her down is to accept the mating bond in full. And this is really important because later on in Wolf Rain, Alexei remembers the story that Nate had told him about accepting the mating bond in order to track his mate. So that's sort of where that connection is between the novella and the book. Eventually he tracks her down to a cabin and they consummate their mating and then they return back. The things that I loved in this novella, there is a huge emphasis on family and the importance of family. I mean, there always is with the Changeling stories, but this is sort of exacerbated by the fact that Tammy is a healer, and the healers are the heart of a Changeling community because they sort of bring everyone together. And even at 19, Tammy embodies that, and she works with everyone in her community, which is why everyone is so annoyed at Nate when he doesn't accept the mating bond. I really liked that everyone did pull together and call Nate on his stupid decisions, particularly Lucas, who is not yet an alpha in this story. He's younger than both Tammy and Nate, and he is really upset with the way that Nate has treated Tammy, and he tells him that. And then the other thing that I really loved is that on one of their anniversaries, Nate buys Tammy flowers, and he ends up buying something that's really hard to care for and look after because it's precious. And he wants to convey that to her. He wants only the best for her, and he buys her orchids. And then we flash forward to the prologue, which is years in the future when they have the twins, Roman and Julian. And Nate comes home and he's still bringing her orchids on their anniversary, which is just really sweet. Then we come to Stroke of Enticement, which is book 3.5 in the series. So this takes place after Caressed by Ice. It is the story of the mating of Annie and Zach. Annie is a human teacher and Zach is a Dark River leopard. He actually works as a park ranger in Yosemite. He meets Annie when he comes to pick up his nephew from school because his nephew Brian has been involved in a fight with another shifter. Brian won't tell Annie the reason why he hit this other kid. She thinks it's weird because Brian is never really physical with other students, but Brian says he's only going to talk to Zach, and so he does tell Zach what happened, and it turns out that this other child was insulting Annie, and he doesn't want to tell his teacher that because he loves her and he doesn't want her to feel bad. Meanwhile, Zach is really intrigued by Brian's teacher. She's very straight-laced, and he notices that she walks with a limp and that she sort of doesn't really fire up until he almost questions her authority. And being attracted to her, he asks her out on a date. He would love to take her through Yosemite Park as a guide. And so they organise that for the next day. And that also leads to her being invited to one of the pack picnics that evening by Brian. And it's a really sweet story. So they go for this hike, and at first Zach is concerned that it will place too much strain on her legs. So we learn that Annie was involved in a train accident as a child, which comes up again in Allegiance of Honor because Annie is the child that Caleb saved from a train wreck. And she tells him that she's fine, she'll let him know if it becomes too much. But they have a really wonderful day sort of exploring the park, and then they go to the pack picnic and she meets a lot of the other changelings, and we see a lot of characters from Dark River that we've met before. He ends up going with her to her family's place for dinner, and her mother has constantly been trying to set her up with academics and people that she deems appropriate, and a changeling is definitely not appropriate. However, Zach totally blows her conceptions out of the water. It turns out he is also a researcher. He has done studies on some of the big cats that live in Yosemite National Park. He's, quite well spoken, and he would do anything for Annie. Zach knows that he is Annie's mate. He just hasn't told her that yet. The things that I loved in this story were Brian standing up for his teacher. You can tell that he has a lot of respect for her, and he's also a child and he doesn't want to hurt her feelings by telling her the truth, even though he's done the wrong thing. He's willing to accept the punishments in order to protect her. The way that Zach courted Annie and treated her with respect was also really wonderful. I also like Zach's showdown with Annie's mum. They have two conversations, one where she finds out that he is actually a published researcher because she's an academic, so she appreciates that kind of thing. And also when she speaks to him privately, and she finally admits that he would take care of her daughter, who she's always been really concerned about because she was injured so young. So that was Stroke of Enticement. I really enjoyed that story. Well, I enjoyed all of the stories in this collection. Then you have Declaration of Courtship, which is book 9.5. This is the story of Grace and Cooper. Cooper is one of the Snowdancer wolf lieutenants, and he's a really dominant wolf changeling, and Grace is a submissive wolf, and a pretty significant one at that. Grace works as an engineer in Cooper's den, and ever since she started working there, Cooper has known that she is his mate. But knowing how dominant he is and how submissive she is, he's sort of held back. And Grace has always been really intrigued and attracted to Cooper. However, he is a really dominant personality, which doesn't sit well with her wolf. But eventually, sort of Cooper gets in her space and tells her that he's going to court her, and he's going to try and find a way for her wolf to be comfortable with him. So this whole thing deals with how they can make this relationship work, how the dominant and submissive wolf personalities mix, and sometimes they don't mix really well at all because they have a lot of moments where he pushes too hard and she backs right off, and she can't even acknowledge him. The things that I loved in this story, Cooper does some amazing things to court Annie, including buying her many courting gifts, from flowers to chocolates and sweets to lingerie, which is a really funny scene in the story with all of her friends trying to find out exactly what it is that he's purchased for her. He also buys her a daisy bracelet because he's picked up that the daisy is one of her favourite flowers based on things that she has worn. She's never told anyone that it's her favourite flower, but he picks up on it. I think the way that Cooper tries to adjust what he's doing so that he can make Grace feel comfortable and safe was also something that I really appreciated, but also how Grace is trying to push herself a little bit and trying to see how far she can push herself, because they both want it to work and they need to figure out how. Another thing that I really loved about this story was how both of them turned to trusted friends. So that was a really interesting one to see about those dynamics. And then the fourth and final novella in this collection is Texture of Intimacy, which is book 10.5. This is Lara and Walker's novella. Walker is Judd's brother. Lara is the snow dancer healer, and they became mates at the end of Kiss of Snow, which was book 10. And then this one sort of looks at how that relationship really begins to develop. I'm actually not going to talk about the plot of this novella, because in fact it didn't really feel like an overarching plot so much as it was them learning how to be with each other and how to balance what they've known, because Walker is an adult Psy who was grown up in silence, and while his silence was never perfect, he learned how to fake it, and he learned how to deal with situations in a way that is very unnatural to the changelings. When something goes wrong, he shuts off his emotions and he thinks coolly and analytically about everything, which is very different to a changeling because they don't shut off their emotions. Lara is a healer, so she's used to always knowing how she feels and how her pack feels. There's a point in the story where Walker basically shuts off his emotions because he's dealing with a critical situation, and she feels that, and she feels like he just goes cold, and she is really upset because he's shut her out. And it's their first big fight that they have because she doesn't want him to just shut her out, but he also didn't do it deliberately, he did it instinctively. So it's about how they learn to manage and learn each other's quirks, but also adjust for each other. And the other big thing about the story was how the Lauren family integrate further into the pack. So at this point, Judd has mated to Brenna, Sienna has mated to Hawk, and Walker and Lara have just mated, and they end up moving into a bigger family apartment within the den because Lara needs to be sort of central within the den. And Walker has his own daughter Marley, and also his sister's son Toby, who he adopted, and they become this family unit, and of course everyone stops by and helps them out. So it's basically a story of these really quiet moments of how they begin to navigate this new relationship. The things that I really loved about this story was how much time we do spend with the Laurens. We see a whole lot of the different relationships, both Walker and Marley's relationship, Marley and Toby's relationship, Judd and Walker's relationship, so on and so forth. It's really fantastic because these were characters who were very distant in the initial books, and now they're part of the pack and they're part of the family, and they're starting to learn how to talk through what they're feeling at any given point in time. There's also a really great scene where Walker and Sienna talk about her abilities, because one of Walker's secondary abilities ties into helping to manage and maintain Sienna's X-Fire abilities. And so they have a really nice conversation around how that's working and what Sienna needs to do moving forward. We get a little bit of information about Judd and Brenna's mating ceremony, which I don't think took place on page at any point. But there's also mention that Brenna's been making Judd watch reality TV shows about weddings and asking him his opinion on wedding dresses, and apparently he's always wrong about them. I did really like the scene where they're moving into their new apartment and everyone comes to help them. There's a really sort of funny throwaway scene where someone makes a comment that they didn't think Walker had this many throw pillows, but in fact it's Sienna and Marley, who never been able to decorate anything of their own, went out and chose all of these cushions to make it more cozy and homely. But most of all, what I really liked about this story was just the fact that it was a quiet story. There wasn't a bigger plot line, there wasn't a suspense element or a mystery happening. It was just this family coming together. And that was beautiful. All right, so that is Wild Invitation and the last of my Psy-Changeling novella wrap-ups. The next video will be my Last Guard video, which will be interesting because I don't think I've filmed any of my in-depth recaps on a book that I've only read once. But what I might do is read it through once and then read it through and then take my notes to film the video, because I think my first read through on books, I always miss heaps of things. So stay tuned. In the comments, if you would like to talk to me about any of these novellas, I would love to have that discussion with you. Obviously, there will be spoilers. This is a spoilery video. If you would like to let me know that you're here, but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave any kind of blue emoji, since the predominant color theme on the front cover of this book is blue. Choose your favorite blue emoji, leave that in the comments. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, everyone.